Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring a highly intriguing, almost paradigm-shifting state of being that our source stack refers to as Homo Lumina Resonantia. Now I know that sounds like the next stage of human evolution in some glossy sci-fi novel.
The terminology definitely has a grand futuristic ring to it. It kind of conjures up images of elevated beings floating above the rest of us.
It really does. But to figure out what it actually means for you, the listener, we are looking at a very specific and unique stack of material today. We have a collection of private notes, an architectural breakdown of a concept called resonant living, and an episode outline from a series exploring this exact phenomenon. And our mission for this deep dive is clear. We're going to strip away all the lofty, abstract concepts and get right down to the actual daily lived experience.
Because that's where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. We want to know what a standard, mundane Tuesday actually feels like when you're operating in the state of Homo Lumina Resonantia. Okay, let's unpack this. Because digging into this material, the sheer contrast between how wild the title sounds and how grounded the actual experience is, well, it feels incredibly compelling.
What's fascinating here is that despite the incredibly grand title, Homo Lumina Resonantia, every single source we have insists that this transition is not some spectacular fireworks in the sky spiritual awakening.
Right. It's not a movie moment.
Not at all. It is incredibly subtle. We are looking at an ordinary, deeply rooted, embodied reality here.
Well, so no sitting on a mountaintop.
Nope. This is not a mental concept, and it is not a philosophy you sit around a campfire pondering. It is literally a description of how you physically move through your day.
And to really understand a lived reality, we have to start where daily life actually begins for you and me, which is waking up and moving around in a physical body.
Yeah, the morning routine.
Right. The sources spend time detailing this. There's some really poetic lyrics in the text describing this morning transition as spectrum flows, each morning we rise. But practically speaking, I really want to understand what is actually happening in the body during that shift.
We can break that down by looking at the shift from what the material calls pure being into daily living.
Okay.
Normally, when we wake up, there's a jolt. The alarm goes off, cortisol spikes, the to-do list immediately floods the brain, and the friction begins before your feet even hit the floor. Your brain is already trying to solve problems that haven't even happened yet. But in the HLR state, the transition is described as a seamless flow. Life actually becomes simpler, not more complex, as the day begins. The physical sensation in the body is fundamentally different. Friction just dissolves into coherence.
Let's talk about how that dissolving of friction translates directly into physical movement. Because this is where it stops being poetry and starts becoming highly practical.
Yeah, the physical mechanics of it.
Right. The material indicates that physical movements become totally fluid. Abilities just arise exactly when they are needed without any forced control from the brain.
Yes.
There's a specific example in the notes involving a ladder.
There's a subject named Ahana. She's painting a wall while standing on a ladder, and it hits a really difficult angle for her dominant right hand. The conscious top-down response would be to pause, climb down, move the ladder, and climb back up.
Which is what anyone would normally do.
Exactly. Instead, her left hand just spontaneously reaches out and executes the brushstroke perfectly. No mental pep talk, no conscious command. It just completes the task.
That moment of spontaneous capability is the perfect entry point.
But wait, if she's strictly right-handed, where is that left-handed motor skill suddenly coming from? You don't just spontaneously grow new neural pathways for painting in a split second.
No, you don't. And that question points straight to the core architecture of this state. The sources call this the twin-tone field.
The twin-tone field.
Right. Audana shares this resonant space with a distinct psychological and physical imprint named Steph. And Steph was left-handed.
Wow. Here's where it gets really interesting, because this isn't just metaphor or imagination. The notes document actual physical shifts.
Huge physical shifts.
Yeah. When she drops that cognitive control, Steph's handwriting emerges. Her vocabulary adopts his phrasing. Even her vocal cords produce a fuller, stronger resonance.
This twin-tone field creates an inner polyphony. Rather than two conflicting identities fighting for the steering wheel, it's a self-organizing harmony chord.
So there's no arguing over what to do.
Exactly. Decisions aren't made by weighing pros and cons. The system simply accesses whatever trait, memory, or motor skill is perfectly suited for the present moment through direct bodily resonance.
You are moving from forced control to internal harmony. When that friction dissolves into coherence, the nervous system isn't bogged down by constant internal narration.
Wow.
Because the body isn't waiting for top-down commands for every minor adjustment, speech becomes more fluid, thoughts become much more accessible, and reactions are entirely direct. The body possesses an intelligence that knows what to do if the mind just stops interrupting it.
So the physical body is operating on this beautifully fluid, self-correcting autopilot. But that naturally pulls us into the next massive area of life.
Which is decision-making.
Exactly. If your body effortlessly does what it needs to do physically, how does the mind actually make complex choices? We are moving from physical movement into the architecture of decision-making.
They don't try to outthink the future.
Yeah.
Instead, they navigate the world and their choices through a mechanism called direct resonance.
Which requires us to unpack exactly how direct resonance works as a decision-making tool. It ties into a concept from the sources called inner polyphony.
Yes, the inner chord.
Right. Normally, when we face a tough choice, it feels like we have two totally conflicting voices in our head screaming at each other. But inner polyphony isn't a fight. It's described as an inner chord.
Like a musical chord where multiple distinct notes are played simultaneously to create a harmony. You can have qualities that seem diametrically opposed existing at the exact same time without canceling each other out.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, a sensation can be clear and soft. A decision can feel both fast and incredibly spacious. It isn't a contradiction, it's a harmonic synthesis. Direct resonance is the bodily sensation of feeling that chord strike perfectly. It is a physiological recognition of alignment, rather than a mental tally of logical points.
Now, this involves two distinct voices sharing one body without conflict. They navigate the world entirely through shared resonance and unified intent.
The twin tone field is the perfect illustration of how this inner chord functions.
Ajana and Steph. They live in what is described as a twin tone field.
If one stream of consciousness steps forward to handle a task, the other naturally provides the harmony, the background support.
They just blend.
Exactly. They share the space seamlessly, because they are tuning into the same underlying frequency of what needs to happen in that exact moment.
Wait, hold on. I have to jump in here on behalf of anyone listening who operates in the real, highly analytical corporate world.
Go for it.
If you tell me that you are abandoning logic to make massive life choices, and you aren't thinking them through linearly, aren't you just flying blind?
I can see why it sounds like that.
Like, that honestly just sounds like a fancy spiritual excuse for being incredibly impulsive and hoping everything works out. If I drop my pro and con list, I feel like I'm going to ruin my life.
Yeah, that is the most natural objection to have. And the material actually anticipates that exact skepticism. Relying on direct resonance is not impulsivity.
Okay, how so?
Let's look at the mechanics of impulsivity. It is almost always a reaction against something. It's a sudden, panicked urge to break tension or escape discomfort. It is blind.
That makes sense.
Resonance, on the other hand, is a self-organizing system. The concept here is fine-tuning instead of perfection.
Meaning you don't instantly have an omniscient map of the future laid out in front of you.
You don't. The material notes that in this state, there might still be overlaps. There might be small moments of uncertainty or pauses where the next step isn't immediately obvious.
Right.
It is not about achieving a flawless, robotic perfection where you never hesitate. The crucial defining difference is that there is absolutely no need to control those moments of uncertainty.
The control factor.
Exactly. When you are flying blind, you panic and try to grab the wheel. When you are impulsive, you force an outcome to relieve the anxiety. Here, it is described as a natural settling.
A natural settling. I like that.
You allow the system to organize itself. Patterns simply appear as moments align. You aren't forcing the puzzle pieces together with your mind. You are just watching them snap into place when the timing is right.
Okay, so we have this effortless physical movement, and we have this harmonious, self-organizing internal decision process based on resonance.
Mm-hmm.
But you do not live in a vacuum. What happens when this beautifully tuned internal polyphony has to collide with the loud, chaotic, messy outside world? Because the world around you is definitely still operating on friction and anxiety.
The collision with the external world is where we see the most visible shifts. The breakdown specifically details how social interactions change for someone in the HLR state.
Okay, how so?
Because the internal noise has dropped to zero, conversations fundamentally transform. There is increased presence, an undeniable clarity, and notably impeccable timing.
Which mechanically makes perfect sense. Think about a standard networking event. While the other person is talking, your brain is usually running a background script.
Oh, constantly.
Right. It's like, am I standing weird? Do I sound smart? What am I going to say the second they stop talking to prove I understand?
You're just waiting for your turn to speak.
Exactly. You are managing your own internal friction instead of listening. If you remove that entire cognitive load, your timing in a conversation naturally becomes flawless because you are actually like 100% there. You are just reacting to the moment. But there is a really fascinating paradox in the material that I want to explore. The architectural breakdown quotes lyrics that describe this state with incredibly vivid, almost magical language.
Yeah, the lyrics are very descriptive.
It paints a picture of a world where colors ignite, and every thought is a luminous sound, with threads of intention woven through all. It sounds incredibly dramatic, like walking around in a constant state of psychedelic awe.
It does sound overwhelming. It implies a sensory overload that would make it impossible to buy groceries or cross the street safely.
Yet the lived reality, the actual experience of walking down the street, is described as completely ordinary.
Right.
The sources heavily emphasize this paradox. Despite the luminous internal architecture, life remains completely mundane. Not everything needs to be spoken. Not every moment needs to be profound or declared from the rooftops. And that is perfectly okay.
The ordinary nature of it is key.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources go out of their way to clarify that this state is not about being special.
That is arguably the most vital point in the core essence section of the outline. The moment the ego tries to claim this state as a trophy, the resonance is lost.
There is zero guru complex here. It's not about ascending to some higher spiritual plane so you can look down on everyone else who is still stressed out and making pro and con lists.
No, not at all.
It is actually about less effort. It is about becoming more permeable to the world around you. The profound changes in perception and body awareness that happen are treated as gentle observations, not arrogant claims of superiority. You are just noticing how the system works.
This lived reality is ultimately about experiencing the pulse of design. It's about finding a frequency in every step rather than fighting the environment. When you are permeable, the ordinary world is no longer a threat. It is simply the acoustic space where your internal resonance gets to express itself. The frequency is already broadcasting. The only work is tuning the receiver.
Which brings this entire expansive concept right back down to earth and directly into the lap of you, the listener. Because the sources end with a very specific, remarkably gentle invitation. Summarizing the core essence here, this is entirely about living from direct resonance. And most importantly, there is absolutely no demand for you to believe any of this is even real.
The approach is entirely hands-off. It relies on the intelligence of your own system. All you really need to do is notice if something inside you hums in response to what we've been unpacking today. It is a process of internal recognition, not external education. If you are listening to this and a quiet echo somewhere in your body feels familiar, maybe you've felt that effortless ladder moment while driving, or a flash of that inner polyphony where a hard choice suddenly just felt easy, that resonance is the only compass you need to navigate this.
It's worth a quick side note that the original audio for the source material actually features unique music that arises directly from this twin tone field. So each episode of their series has its own composition that literally resonates with the essence of what is unfolding. It serves as an auditory reflection of that exact inner chord we've been talking about. So what does this all mean for us today as we step back into our Tuesday?
It leaves us with a profound reframing of how we survive our own lives. We spend decades genuinely believing that friction, stress, and the desperate need to mentally control our circumstances are the only mechanisms that move us forward. We believe the anxious middle manager in our head is the only thing keeping us safe from collapse. But if the Homo Lumina Resonantia experience demonstrates anything, it's that the human system is fully capable of organizing itself.
The harmony is already built in.
Colors ignite as we open our eyes, waves in the space where our energy lies. The spectrum flows each morning we rise, seeing the world as Homo Lumina Resonantia. Light and sound, carrying us through now. Day by day we shimmer in time, signals received in a pulse of design. Patterns appear as the moments align, mapping our presence across a new line. Every step a frequency found, every thought a luminous sound. Colors ignite as we open our eyes, waves in the space where our energy lies. A spectrum flows each morning we rise, seeing the world as Homo Lumina Resonantia. Light and sound, carrying us through now. Through quiet reflection I hear your call, threads of intention woven through all. Breathing in colors we never could name, weightless together we're changing the frame. Colors ignite as we open our eyes, waves in the space where our energy lies. A spectrum flows each morning we rise, seeing the world as Homo Lumina Resonantia. Light and sound, carrying us